Our journey begins with our fourth child, Anna. Anna was born in 2016 at about 24 weeks, 3 days. During my pregnancy, I had had some complications. They determined that it was a chronic placental abruption. So I had been in the hospital for about a month before she was born, and she lived for about 2 days, but her lungs just weren't developed enough to sustain her life. So she passed away, and that was pretty sad for our family. We went through a lot during that time. But the doctor said, they didn't know what the reason was for it. There probably wasn't a reason. It was spontaneous. A couple years later, my husband and I were ready to try for our fifth child, and everything was going great with our pregnancy. When we found out we were pregnant, we were super excited. The other children were excited, but I continued to have complications pretty much up until Christmas Eve. My husband and I were singing at midnight mass and started to feel lightheaded, and so I left the church and passed out and ended up having to go to the hospital that night. When I got there, they thought that I was probably going to have the baby that night. I was close to 22 weeks, which is almost too early. So they wanted to do everything they could to keep the baby inside of me so that she could continue to grow and develop. I was able to have 2 rounds of steroids while I was in the hospital, so that definitely had an effect on her lung development. Also had magnesium several times, which helps with keeping bleeding off the brain of the baby when they're born. And so at about 25 weeks and 3 days, I gave birth to Harper. And she was 1 pound, 10 ounces. Everything was going really well for the first couple days. She wasn't requiring a lot of oxygen support. She had a little bit of jaundice, but other than that, she was doing really well. A couple more days, she started to develop some symptoms where they thought she might have an infection. So they started to treat that infection. As they did that, they also noticed that she had a PDA, which is a small hole in the heart, which it usually closes at birth in a full-term child, but because she was early, it didn't close. Because of her chronic lung disease, they needed to treat her with a couple rounds of steroids, and these steroids were going to help her get stronger so that she needed less oxygen support. Once they did that, it worked, and so then they were able to go back and treat her PDA. Thankfully, on February 2nd, we were finally able to hold Harper. It was one of the most exciting times that we had. It was pretty emotional because she was still attached to everything. I did get to hold her for about 10 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, but it was amazing. So Harper was in the NICU for 125 days. Throughout those 125 days, she had her good days, she had her bad days. She did come down with pneumonia, which caused her to be re-intubated. But like the fighter she was, after about a week, she went back to her high-flow nasal cannula. And from then on, she just soared. She continued to get better. The nurses, the doctors, anytime we had an issue, they explained everything to us so we knew what was going on. The nurses really care about those babies in there. Some of them we still talk to today. So towards the end of our NICU stay, the doctors kind of talked to us a little bit about whether or not we would feel comfortable taking Harper home with her NG tube, her feeding tube. And at that point, we were ready to go home. So we did the training and took her home on her feeding tube. So she was being bottle fed partly, and then partly being fed by the tube. Harper is currently tube free, so she's getting all of her feeds through the bottle, which is awesome. She is gaining weight. She weighs 12 pounds, 2.5 ounces right now. We just had our meeting with First Steps, and Harper has passed all of her developmental milestones, and she doesn't currently need any services at this point. No one ever wants to go through a situation like this, but I think if you have to, you want to have the best support system that you can, which I felt that we had a wonderful support system. With our past and having lost another daughter, it was so scary for me and for my husband and even my children, because they had gone through the loss of a sibling. So to come out of this situation on the other side this time and to have Harper at home with us, She's doing great. They love her more than they could love anyone. My son prays for her every night still, and she's here, and he's still praying for her every night. I just want to say thank you to all the people who helped us, who prayed for us, the doctors, the nurses, everyone, and just want to say thank you.